Hi, I'm Will Taegel, and I'm beginning this lecture on Rachel Carson in the midst of a massive storm here where I'm recording in the hill country of Texas. And it's raining and lightning and thunder, and actually the sea is around us. And this spring is anything but silent, largely because Rachel Carson has done the great work of the 20th century that has made in the 21st century possible for us to have the kind of life that we have. We wouldn't have had it without her. And I'm going to tell you why and how that happened in just a moment. So with that rousing moment of introduction, I want to talk with you somewhat with the passion of the storm this morning. Because if there's anything that Rachel Carson has helped us with as scientists, is that we have to begin with passion and then reflect. Rachel Carson is the most important person of the 20th century. What, you say? You may or may not agree with what I just said. Let's see why I have reached that conclusion as I have delved deeply into Rachel's life and works. Suppose for a moment that deep implicate consciousness is seeking entry through the medium of ecofields. This implicate consciousness, sometimes referred to by Jung as the collective unconscious, by native indigenous people as a web, and in my work as the web of ecofields, and in other mystic traditions as the world's soul. This implicate consciousness generates a torus motion, ever flowing, to become explicate in Earth's life. The most important task of Earth's life today is rebalancing humans within the larger ecofields. We humans have gone totally awry, have we not? Are we not completely out of sync with the larger order? So it's completely necessary that a rebalancing takes precedence over everything, over human rights, over political vagaries. Where, this deeper consciousness asks, can I find an opening among a remnant of humans to assist with the rebalancing? Where can I find someone or a group of someones whose tuning devices of their own consciousness is on a wavelength to be receptive to what needs to happen at this particular moment in Earth's unfolding? Where, says the implicate consciousness, can I find humans whose bandwidth is wide enough to carry the message? Where can I find humans who can walk the bridge of Earth consciousness to a new era? Where can I find humans who are willing to return the focus of their unique brand of consciousness to the web of life? In the 1950s and 60s, there were a few receptors to the implicate consciousness. You know well: Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., Gorbachev, the Beatles. But perhaps the most important, as I'm saying, and the least known, is the focus of our great book today, Rachel Carson. Before I elaborate on such an astounding and debatable comment, focus on where we experience the implicate becoming explicate in our daily lives. As usual, nature loves to surprise us by flowing through her artists. In this case, as an example, through Hollywood movie makers. Consider a few recent movies. You like to go to movies? Avatar, Wonder Woman, Black Panther, and perhaps for me, most of all, The Shape of Water. Let's consider then, as a first point in our discussion today about the Silent Spring, The Shape of Water and how it is a close relative, even an offspring, of Rachel Carson. If you went to the movie, you recall the plot. Elisa Esposito was found in a river as an orphan child with wounds on her neck. She is mute and communicates through the mother tongue of sign language. She lives alone in an apartment above a cinema and works as a cleaning woman at a secret government laboratory at the height of the Cold War in the 1950s. Her friends are a gay next-door neighbor by the name of Giles, and also her co-worker, Zelda, a woman who also serves as an interpreter at their janitorial work. The facility where they work receives a mysterious creature captured from a South American river by an Air Force colonel who is in charge of the project to study, treating the creature as an objectified rat. Curious about the creature, Elisa discovers it is a humanoid amphibian, perhaps an ancestor of an ancient civilization. She begins visiting this creature in secret, and the two form a close bond. Seeking to exploit the creature to American advantage in the space race, the colonel seeks to vivisect it. When the mute Elisa learns of the Americans' plan for this creature, she persuades her friend Giles to help her free him. She liberates the creature from military and industrial capture, an important point. Once freed, Elisa keeps the creature in her bathtub, adding salt to the water to keep him alive. She plans to release the creature into a nearby canal when it will be opened to the ocean in several days' time. The creature, it seems, has healing power and touches Giles on his balding head and his wounded arm. In a moving scene, Elisa and the primal creature connect sexually in a bathroom she fills completely with water. Like Moses, Elisa had come out of the river as a baby, and water was the birthplace also of the primal creature. And water was the context of their bonding. Water, it seems, shapes them all, and us. The story concludes at the watery canal that leads to the open ocean. Elisa and Giles are there to bid farewell to the creature. But the colonel arrives, shoots Elisa and the primal creature, who appear to die. However, the creature heals himself and Elisa, and they are both raised from the dead. They jump into the water together. He touches the scars on her neck from her childhood wound, and the wound itself reveal and transform into gills like his. Together, the masculine and feminine swim into the ocean waters together. In a closing voiceover narration, Giles, her gay neighbor, conveys his belief that Elisa lived, quote, happily ever after with the primal creature in the sea, he quotes a poem. Unable to perceive the shape of you, I find you all around me. Your presence fills my eyes with your love. It humbles my heart, for you, like the shape of water, are everywhere. Like Elisa, Rachel Carson is a conduit of implicate consciousness to connect us with the waters, with the primal, with the wild. As we shall see, Rachel seeks for us to have a physical intimacy with the wild, which is that dimension of nature that will not be tamed by human, and which lies beyond human control. Like the primal creature from the river, Rachel Carson offers us the power of the wild heart to heal our childhood wounds that separate us from the mother tongue, our ability to bond. Now consider a second point. Rachel Carson's other great book, The Sea Around Us, which is the mother of both Silent Spring and The Shape of Water. Like Elisa, Rachel enters the sea and tells us about a holy baptism with water, sort of like a moment ago when I was introducing this lecture. She merges with the water of consciousness. In her workaday life as a marine biologist, Rachel is prim and proper, dressing in the conservative garb of the 1950s, her hair coiffed and heavy with a sticky spray. But in the late night and early morning, she walks barefoot along the seashore, merging with every sea creature that comes to sight. Like Elisa, she learns to breathe the breath of the sea. Like Elisa, she learns the mother tongue of the sea creatures. Like Elisa, her connection is so deep with the sea, it appears that they are genitally connected. Like Elisa, she suffers greatly, only to be reborn in a return to the sea. Listen directly to Rachel and her writing for just a moment. Quote, "Eventually humans found their way back to the sea. Standing on its shores, we must have looked out upon it with wonder and curiosity, compounded with an unconscious recognition of our deep lineage with water." She writes again, "Fish, amphibians, and reptiles, warm-blooded birds and mammals, each of us carries in our veins a salty stream in which the elements of sodium, potassium, and calcium are combined in almost the same proportion as sea water." Again she writes, "The next time you stand on a beach at night, watching the moon's bright path across the water, and the consciousness of moon-drawn tides, remember that the moon itself may have been born of a great tidal wave of earthly substance, torn off into space. And remember, if the moon was formed in this fashion, the event may have had much to do with the shaping of the ocean basins and the continents as we know them today." Again, her voice links us. Quote, "Those who dwell among the beauties and mysteries of the earth are never alone, never weary of life. Those who contemplate the beauty of the earth find reserves of strength that will endure as long as life lasts. The more clearly we can focus our attention on the wonders and realities of the universe, the less capacity we have for destruction. Let me say that again. The more clearly we can focus our attention on the wonders and realities of the universe, the less capacity we have for destruction. As we drink in the beauty of her words, we are aware of her profound connectivity with the sea, a connection that is born of awe and wonder. Rachel herself is defined by the sea. She walks its shores. She swims its waters. Before her scientific study, before her writing, before her political action, comes this spiritual linkage with the sea. Here's our challenge. To understand Silent Spring means taking the time to know Rachel Carson as a complete child of nature. Silent Spring studies the effect of human-made chemicals within the environment. In the book, she calls BS on mainstream science. She calls BS on corporate giants. She calls BS on slumbering and corrupt politicians. She calls BS on all of us who talk glibly about climate change, but do little to adapt our lifestyles. Reading the book is sometimes a slog through the details of her first-rate science. Yes, as I read her book, my eyes glaze over and my mind wanders away. Then I recall that her science and the call to action emerges from the deep encounter she has with the sea and with her childhood farm. From Rachel Carson, we get the divine feminine as she invites us to passionate connection in our studies. Yes, she is a marine biologist, but first and foremost, she is an engaged ecologist. She is a nature-based spirit. Like Elisa in The Shape of Water, everything begins and proceeds out of the passion of relationship. That segues into a third point in our grasp of this book, The Silent Spring, and that is Rachel's relationship with Dorothy Freeman. The eye of Rachel's energetic hurricane. Think of a creative triangle out of which Rachel's most important work emerged. Rachel is one point of the triangle. Dorothy is a second point. And the third point is the sea itself along the seashore of Maine, where they lived together during the summer. Out of this powerful, energetic, and fecund triangle came the book, Silent Spring. Although Rachel wrote no autobiography, she did leave letters which she exchanged, sometimes daily, with Dorothy Freeman. Some 750 of these letters are collected in a book called Always Rachel. The book is edited by Dorothy Freeman's granddaughter. In 1953, Rachel became Freeman's summertime neighbor on Southport Island in Maine. The two first discovered a shared love for and deep experience with and lyrical descriptions of the natural world, especially their beloved island. Their friendship quickly blossomed as each realized she had found in the other a soulmate. To read this collection of letters is like eavesdropping on an extended conversation that mixes the mundane events of two ordinary women, their family life, with the details of the giant Rachel Carson and her research and writing of Silent Spring. Rachel drew on the fires of love and a love affair with Dorothy and also the island to write. No wonder there's so much passion in her writing. No wonder we can smell the salt in the air as we read. No wonder we can hear the silence when the birds do not sing. No wonder the introduction of wild passion into scientific inquiry. We inevitably are curious about the nature of the women's relationship. Martha Freeman, Dorothy's granddaughter, tells of the two women burning most of their frankly romantic letters to protect themselves from the homophobic culture in which they lived. Likely, says the granddaughter, the relationship was sexual. But even more important, theirs was a deeply loving friendship, fired by the close encounters with the wild and natural sea. As I read Dorothy's and Rachel's passionate exchanges in their letters, I recall the relationship that one of our greatest poets, Rumi, had with his friend and mentor Shams. As an early adult, Rumi was a charming, wealthy nobleman, a genius theologian, a law professor, and a brilliant but reserved scholar. In his midlife, Rumi met a wandering and wild holy man by the name of Shams. After this meeting, Rumi was transformed from a bookish scholar into an impassioned seeker of truth and love. Rumi's poetry shows us a relational love that precedes and is later served by reason. If critical thinking was the primary approach to Shams, Rumi would have run away as fast as he could into the protective arms of law and academia. So it was with Rachel and Dorothy. Rachel was a wild, liberal Democrat. Dorothy was a reserved Republican. Rachel was a single woman with no children. Dorothy was married and had children. Their untamed Shams was the seashore itself of Maine. Rumi was a law professor who realized that before all our laws comes the law of love. Rachel was a marine biologist who realized that before scientific reflection comes the passion of relationship. Listen to Rachel as she writes passionately to her love at the time that Silent Spring was being researched. She writes, "My darling Dorothy, now I've read the letter that only you could have written. I waited until we could be alone together on the train. Darling, if one can assume anything so unthinkable as to suppose I did not know why I dedicated the book to you, your letter would make it all clear. It is because there is no one else like you in my life, now or ever. As only you could, you summed up the pages of your note with all the sweetness and joy and deep happiness we have had the past 2 years. And because of you, I feel it all again in its fresh and delicate beauty. The one thing, Dorothy, that I wish today, above all else, is that as the years pass, we may never come to take for granted this beautiful sympathy and understanding that exists between us. But may we always feel shining wonder as we do today. Once, years ago, I visited a nearby harbor that had inspired the two women and had inspired this letter I just read. Not far from the Carson cottage, whale and puffin still frolic. The thin whales are over 90 feet long, leviathans of the deep who weigh up to 160,000 pounds. Next to the whales are dolphins racing, jumping, and shimmering in large pods. Wind blows off of the 46-degree water. I ponder the scene. Like Einstein, who built fires beside the glacier lake to birth the special and general theories of relativity, Rachel and Dorothy built fires to ward off the cold on the beach and listened to see if they could hear the low-frequency vocalization of the whales, the most powerful and ubiquitous biological sounds of the ocean. If you listen closely when you read Rachel Carson, you can hear the whales. You can feel the spray of the dolphins. You can feel the love of the two women. Rachel and Dorothy often went to the New Wagon Inn near Ocean Point, where Rachel would write and where they sat and soaked up the serenity of the shore. In their final fall together in 1963, Rachel and Dorothy marveled at the migration of monarch butterflies at the inn. They marveled at their beauty, their fragility, their endurance. Knowing she was dying, Rachel wrote to Dorothy of their precious time together, quote, "Most of all, my darling, I shall remember the monarchs." When Rachel Carson finally succumbed to breast cancer, Dorothy spread her ashes at the rocky edge with the sound of the whale in the background. Now focus our attention for a fourth point, largely unrecognized, the legacy of Rachel Carson. And here's why I think she is the crucial person of the 20th century, leading us into the 21st. Here's legacy number one. When you read Silent Spring, you might get tired of the science and specificity of Rachel's unveiling the destructiveness of human-made toxic chemicals on the environment. But the slow reading becomes worth it when you realize she changed the use of chemicals across the planet. Every one of the toxic chemicals named in the book, every last one, was either banned or restricted in the United States 12 years after she published the book. Farm chemicals, pest control chemicals, household chemicals, all underwent scrutiny, regulation, and in many cases, banishment. Legacy number two. Rachel Carson called into question mainstream science. in her systemic approach to seeing Earth so deeply related that it could not be understood by reducing it to its component parts, she opened up a new world of science. Earth is alive, she railed, not dead. Rachel knocked down the door that Einstein had cracked open. She pointed out that large corporations had bought their own scientists to justify the degradation of the environment. Rachel challenged the notion that humans could obtain mastery over nature by chemicals, bombs, and yes, space travel. She focused us on Earth as a living web of relationships. The science of ecology, listen to me, the science of ecology has many fathers, but only one mother, one we have long ignored. Rachel Carson. Legacy number 3. Most importantly, Silent Spring launched the modern global environmental movement. The ecological interconnections between nature and human society that it described went far beyond the limited concerns of the conservation movement about conserving soils, forests, and water. Generations of Americans found their perspectives widened and their activism inspired by this simple woman. Legacy number 4. How many of you have eaten organic foods in the last week? Before Rachel, the natural and organic foods movement was a small and ridiculed group of people. In the decades to come, the movement grew until even large supermarket chains like Walmart now carry organic food. Carson's concern about dangerous substances in food gradually became a mainstream concern. Organic foods constitute a large and growing sector of today's agricultural production. When you eat organic this week, say thank you, Rachel. Legacy number 5, climate change. 44 years before Al Gore published An Inconvenient Truth, Rachel confronted us with the direction of a consumer society. Incredibly, she saw that massive changes were on the way, and she saw that human extinction was on the table. Now let me close by asking the question, where do we go from here? Since I immersed myself in all things Rachel Carson, I realized how little I have known about her and her work. Basically, I was ignorant. I have asked person after person what they know of this remarkable woman. Most cultural creatives have a vague memory, maybe reading the book, but not much more. I had dinner with a prominent biologist not long ago. I was going on and on about Rachel Carson. He looked blank. He reached into his pocket and Googled her on his iPhone, looked up with amazement saying, "How did I not know of such an important person? I'm a biologist." Indeed, all of that said, I must acknowledge that, despite her incredible legacy, we continue to ignore the health of our Mother Earth. The increase of endocrine disruptors in food and water has raised suspicion that they are responsible for a multitude of perplexing problems: genital deformities in newborn boys, early puberty in girls, declining sperm count in adult males, rising rates of prostate and testicular cancer, and problems in sexual development and reproduction. Not to mention, perhaps the most important, the epidemic of breast cancer. Other possible health effects include abnormal brain development, obesity, and diabetes. In addition, endocrine disruptors like BPA enter the environment and disrupt fish and wildlife. Scientists have documented numerous effects. Studies have found male fish with female sex characteristics in the Potomac River. Florida alligators have stunted genitals. Amphibians have extra legs, all due to concentrations of endocrine disruptors in the water. The world today is awash in a sea of chemicals never before seen in nature, man-made chemicals. No one really knows the long-term effect of these substances, individually or in unpredictable combination, either on human health or the health of ecosystems. The chemicals are not the same as the one Carson indicated in Silent Spring, yet they are produced, sold, and used on an unsuspecting public by the same interconnected complex of profit-driven companies and governmental authorities. One prominent cancer researcher, Zach Bush, said to me, quote, almost all humans on the planet have a weed killer Roundup in their intestines. It is everywhere in the food chain. Take a moment to ponder that. Today, one of our largest challenges is to purify ourselves and purify the food chain that is our mother. Lest I end on such a discouraging note, I want to return to Rachel's story in the beginning of her book, As a Divine Feminine. As a little girl, she was awakened spiritually and scientifically by the sound of water in a nearby stream. In a sense, this stream was her baptism. Her passion for connecting with the natural order became the passion of a new science of engaged ecology. This was her teaching. She suffered the attacks of mainstream science and the attacks of corporate America on behalf of her vision. Like Jesus, this was her crucifixion. As she wrote the important chapters on cancer in her book, Silent Spring, she herself was diagnosed with breast cancer. This was her crucifixion. This was her death. She suffered the effects of the disease during the publication of the book you read. She suffered as she advocated all the while for the health of the mother, the earth, from a wheelchair. At age 56, just before she died, she quoted these important words. Now, I truly believe that we in this generation must come to terms with nature. And I think we're challenged as humankind has never been challenged before to prove our maturity and our mastery, not of our nature, but of ourselves. Hopefully, you and I, as we read this book and as we talk, we can become Rachel Carson's resurrection. As the new era she envisioned is birthed in us, and instead of the silent spring, we shall speak in a forgotten language, a mother tongue, as an expression of the mother herself.